So, welcome to the 107th edition of Airhacks TV. And let's start right away with the time travel. So, 100 episodes back, what were the questions and whether they are up to date or not? This is the most exciting question or fact. So first, Java 1 news and coverage. I actually forgot what I covered back then, but it was the Java 1 in 2014. So it seems like I was back from Java 1, so skip this one, the first one. And the second one is different ways to reference an entity manager. So I would say still up to date. So entity manager still in use, highly in use. What entity manager is a replacement of a almost object-oriented DAO. So what entity manager does, it encapsulates Hibernate and Eclipse Link and OpenJPA persistence implementations. And let's see how to reference the entity manager. So you can use the persistence context. You can use indirectly the @inject. You could use the entity manager factory, I think, and use different annotation. And then you can have even JNDI lookup. Hard to tell why it was so interesting. Fact is, for years I just used persistence context. So and also interesting one, what is session scoped and stateful beans? What's the difference between session scoped and stateful bean? So interesting part. So what I mean, the concept is still useful of stateful EJBs or HTTP or session scope. So what's the difference? So scope in CDI context always means is like garbage collection built in. So what it means is after the session is closed, all objects are automatically closed. And stateful EJBs you had to call remove. So why I'm covering this at all? Because if you're doing stream processing, let's say Kafka or Apache Pulsar, then you would like actually to maintain state. And this is similar concept because as long as you know your processor is working and let's say computing an average, then the state has to be kept. So there is no usually shutdown. But interesting part is the state is back actually to everything. So back then, stateless was, everyone talked about stateless, and I always remembered, maybe Thiago remembers from the shows, I always said, hopefully I remember this correctly, but what I said is, all applications have state, the question is where it is stored. So it is not a big deal, to keep your entire application stateless and store the entire state in the database, because if your database doesn't scale, everything becomes worse. So, and this is similar to Kafka actually. So if you take a look at Kafka streams, what happens behind the scenes is there's the state is stored in RocksDB, which is key value pairs database or a native implementation of a database, and is backed up by internal topics. So this happens behind the scenes, and this is not like it is kind of persistent state. So if you for instance calculating the averages, this is the intermediate state which is kept for you. And if you shut down the applications and you restore the applications, the state is reconstructed. So it's called stateful calculations. So request scoped entity manager and web framework. So what we talked back then is with request scoped, what happens after every transaction, the entity manager is shut down and forgets the internal transactional cache. So and what I did, and I will still do, but the world changed. So what I did a hack back then. I annotated the entity manager as I injected the entity manager to a session scoped or a stateful EJB. So the entire transactional cache remained opened. And what I could achieve, something similar like to Kafka right now, I could just, send events or invoke the entity manager between the request, HTTP request, and the entity manager remembered what I did. And after calling save, the entire state was persisted. And this was a nice trick for more sophisticated applications. Then was a huge drama. I exactly remember someone found something on Stack Overflow. I think that one-to-many JPA relations have to be avoided. And what I remember back then was the problem still with lazy loading. I have to say, after all these years, I reviewed a lots of applications. End of last year, lots of one-to-many relations, and they are still working after, 8 years. Interestingly, what I see a lot, I don't know why. So if you building a JPA application, take a look on your many to one relations. What I still find in projects, many to one lazy loading, which doesn't make a lot of sense, because if you think about this, what happens, right? So we have one on the right side and millions on the left side. If the application is, if the relation is marked as lazy, what happens behind the scenes for the end side, you have to create a lot of proxies, which costs memory and can lead even to memory problems or shortcomings. Storing JPA entities and persistence by reachability. I don't remember what you talk about, but what I can imagine is, there's always the discussion, if you have, the root of the graph and you store the root, what happens with the children? Is Jenkins a microservice? So back then, there was the this is what I remember. I wrote, I think, a post. And because there was microservices were huge, still are. Watch, the thread from I retweeted a tweet from Kelsey Hightower, which was picked up by Mr. Yankov. And there was a huge thread right now on Twitter regarding microservices. And what I said, okay, if you take a look at the Martin Fowler's definition of microservices, and if you take a look on Jenkins, so it means that Jenkins is the perfect microservice. And this was fun back then. And also interesting questions. If you have lots of EJBs, stateless EJBs, can you have one EJB per entity? There's always, the thinking that EJBs are expensive, so you cannot have too many of them, which was never true. So right now I use less EJBs. I use, instead of EJBs, CDI managed beans, but it's the same overhead. I would maybe even a little bit more, and there was never an issue if you have too many of them. Okay, this was the recap of 8 years old episode. I would say questions still up to date, right? You could still use questions. By the way, you are a nice crowd of viewers and listeners. What happened since last Airhacks TV? This happened. Alexander, I forgot his last name, but I will take a look. Suggested, or there was a chat regarding Discord server, and we have our own Discord server. It is public one. It's called Airhacks, so you can just join. But be nice, be productive and constructive. Like right now, it's a nice community of people. Not only people also can actually answer your questions. Are really nice people, like the world famous Brazilian Java man, for instance, right? Bruno Souza. And the Quarkus people and Helidon and GraalVM. So if you like, just join the Discord server. It is just just fun. And the coordinates are just, you have to remember, Airhacks. So it is discord.com, invite Airhacks. That's all. If you are nice and interested and would like to have some fun, just join. What I do there, this is like low volume, so don't be afraid. And I will announce, some conferences there if I don't forget. And what also happened, I think a few weeks ago, I delivered a session at the Chicago Java user group, also nice crowd, and they also have a Discord server, so you can also join them. And so I'm on both servers right now. And okay, so Discord is a nice place, so and also nice app. Okay, so this was like a semi-ad for our Discord. And, then a real ad regarding my workshops. So in summer, there will be AWS Java Bootstrap, which I will cover, all the basics from the beginning, because we didn't do this, I think, for months or years. And the question is why I'm not using Oracle Cloud, Google Cloud, or Azure. And the answer is because most of my projects are AWS right now. And the problem, if I do something with Azure, I always remember, the AWS names, which is a mess in a training. But some Azure projects are on the horizon. After I pick some projects and just remap the naming to Azure, I will also offer an Azure training if you like. Okay, now that's all. Okay, podcast is going strong. I would say what I really enjoyed, the recent one is Mary Grigleski, and she was that good, the conversation was that interesting that we split the episode to two halves, or we didn't even record the next one, but I try to ask her what she did with with Java, and it was really interesting. So I really enjoyed that. Okay, now after I don't know how long, 20 minutes, the very first question or the second one. So, do you know whether in Quarkus the runtime thread is pool is used when I use Java Stream parallel invocation? I forgot to look at the source code, so this was my to-do. I'm really sorry, I forgot it, but I'm pretty sure it is not. Why not? Because in Stream parallel uses the fork join pool. This is the regular situation. And I look at that, a few years ago in a project and also on application servers, and this was never out of the box. Actually, I have the problem in my current project with the parallel, and I debug that, and it is not using this. This is funny because what I try to do, we try, to write in parallel to I/O stuff. So it was S3 buckets. And I had to set up the common parallelism. So common parallelism is a setting for fork join pool. So Mr. Waldmeier, let's see, first name? No first name. You have just last name. No, Mr. Waldmeier. So what I wanted to tell you, I'm 80-90% sure not. And because I have the problem right now in my projects, what I do, search for common parallelism. There is a setting, -d setting, where you can control the parallelism of the parallel in a stream, because you use fork join in the background. I don't think Quarkus changed that. Okay, now a great question from Tiago. Ask at Discord. So some questions I will pick from the Discord channel, and maybe. Let's see, maybe I should, answer something from the chat. Okay, could you shed some light on real use case of stateful session beans? I would say too late, because EJBs are out of fashion, and the microprofile runtimes don't support EJBs. But the basic idea is fairly simple. So what happened behind the scenes, if you have a reference to a class, you add the reference to a class. There are stateful session beans. I would say the stateful session beans are just a natural way you would expect how they behave, because you have the reference and the state is kept for you. One-to-one relation. Stateless EJBs, there was N-to-M relations. So you had a proxy, but on every call they were replaced. So stateless EJBs are very like AWS Lambda. Stateful session beans are like, a remote call to an object with state. Brett, Brett Tucker, you are highly invited. If you like, we can even create, our own channel, how to create a great Glühwein. So, no problem. Exactly. Chicago Java user group, CJAC, also nice Discord server. You can also join them. I would say you have to join them. It was a pleasure. It was really nice community. So next. Benjamin asked me, how would you make a JSF web app running on JBoss EIP Whitefly stateless to scale it horizontally? Is there a way to move the session scope beans from RAM into a database like Postgres? Yes, it is. Session scope beans are going to be serialized in somewhere, and all application servers I know support persistence, and this can be a file storage, it can be database. Even the old WebSphere I used years ago was able to serialize the session into DB2. So I would say you could do this, but there is also possibility for stateless JSF where the state is stored on the client. And I actually did a lot of performance optimizations for JSF, because what you could do, you can store the state on the server, you can store the state on the client, and you can compress the state or not. And they were settings I remember from the Mojara. MOJRRRA, so did a lots of experiments there. Okay, Ruben asked me, best common practice to define keys in a map. A hash function, base 64 encoding, etc., or just plain vanilla string is fine. So I always used plain string because, maybe Ruben, you are thinking too far. What I think, if you have a key in a hash map and the key is a string, so my expectation is this string is readable, right? It represents something. I mean, you can read it. So if you say hash map to string, you will see in the console, something which makes sense. If you say no, the keys don't make sense for you, because or don't make sense for you. The keys are technical keys which are auto-generated, and you cannot something which can be stored which makes sense. That is more interesting. I would say then it's important that it's like the cardinality is high. So it means is that the hash value is good. So not that the hash map degrades to an array. So exactly. And the question is, are there libraries out there? So what do you if you say I don't care what to use, then maybe take a look at UID, for instance. So it generates random things. This could work. And I remember Google Guava library also presents some hashing functions, but I have to say I never did it. So I'm using just strings. Samir asked me, are there any outbox inbox Java library? So outbox Java libraries, the Debezium is outbox, and inbox, I don't know what you mean by inbox, but this outbox and inbox pattern and actors is also was also used by library called Akka, which is still used. They changed license recently, but I try to avoid Akka because it didn't solve my problems. So Ruben says, Danke, Adam, which is German. Danke thinks thank you. And yeah, thank you. You liked my answer. And now back to my questions, or, the viewer questions. And now to Tiago's question. So, and very good question, to the point. And I think, so I actually registered several talks and conferences just to cover this indirectly. And I tell you why. What Tiago observed, and he's absolutely right, what I preached over the years is, or my observation is, application servers are great because they clearly separate the business logic from the infrastructure. And I still believe in it. And there's also another question regarding how to reload, which is also related to this. Another question is, now I'm using micro jars and fat jars or whatever, how it changed. And Tiago asked me this on the Discord server. Okay. So let's see whether we manage to do this in 10 minutes. But if you ask me now questions, you have to be careful, in which context, about which context we are, or which context we are covering. So on-premise or in the cloud. And the question is, or why is the case. So on-premise with application servers, so the idea was that the application servers are perfect. So they run all the time, and you can reload the stuff. You can, during their running, you could change the configuration and everything is fine. So the application server was something like a cloud, and you pushed the applications to the application server. What I'm doing right now in all my projects, I'm misusing, or actually using, right, AWS Lambda right now, and the applications running on AWS Lambda, and they look exactly like the application server. The source code is exactly the same as the application server. So this is Jakarta in microprofile. And the application doesn't know anything that it runs on Lambda, but it runs on Lambda. Now, the question is, the application servers, the idea was the business logic was strictly separated from the infrastructure. Now, on AWS Lambda, it goes even one step further. It depends how you consider, the responsibilities of the departments on premise. For instance, if you take a look at my GitHub account, and you can download a project, and the name is or clone a project with the name Quarkus CDK AWS Plain. So it looks like a microprofile application, but it is actually AWS Lambda. And if you take a look at the CDK, what happens there, I just say, runtime Java 11, and soon hopefully Java 17. So what means is, if I deploy to the cloud, I don't even care about the JVM. I just say I would like to have Java 17 and I'm done, right? So what it means is the entire responsibility about the infrastructure is completely covered by the cloud. So what I'm shipping now, this is the difference. But what I'm shipping is the Quarkus with a Lambda extension and business logic. So the entire function.zip is lots of bytecode, but my code doesn't depend on Quarkus. But Lambda needs, Quarkus as an intermediate layer. So I would say, so what change over time, the separation between the business logic and infrastructure is stricter, because right now I don't care. I didn't use Docker for 2 years or something like this, right? So just for presentations. But in my projects, I just shipping business logic bytecode with with a little bit of Quarkus. But if you would take a look at the function zip, it is, mass optimized by Quarkus, right? Because what you will find inside is how Quarkus reads HTTP events, translates the calls to JAX-RS, and removes reflection and stuff like that. So, but if I would work on premise with application servers, it would be the same. And the same means I still would use thin wars without any dependencies. And now even more, because I'm now more believable, after all the security problems we had, last years. Now everyone is no more interested in dependencies. So this is at least my suspicion, right? So back then I had to argue why I don't like dependencies. Now there's no argue. Everyone says it's good not to have dependencies. Okay. And in the Quarkus or Helidon case, what I will do, this now depends projects or product. So if I will ship and product based on Quarkus on premise, I will absolutely layer the jar, because then I could say, okay, Quarkus, let's say 2.16.3, I think is the current release. I would create a Docker super image with all the dependencies, microprofile dependencies I need. And then my business logic will inherit from that. Okay. So also, I already, saw the reaction after some of my session and conference sessions. So the attendee says, so what's wrong with you? No, if you go to the clouds, you don't care about abstractions or whatever. So this is two modes of operation. If I would, on premise, I don't like, to depending on a single vendor. If I go to the cloud, I'm already depending on the cloud, on, the security and the networking and all the infrastructure. So I don't. If I go to the cloud, then I really would like to use the cloud. I don't try to abstract the cloud, and if I remain on premise, I would like to be independent from the products, because there is no need to be dependent on the products. So okay, I hope it is understandable somehow, but it's true. So if I'm in the cloud, my architecture is exactly opposite, to architecture on premise. For instance, on premise, I would use Apache Kafka. In the cloud, I would prefer Kinesis, AWS Kinesis. Why? It is proprietary. But in the cloud, I say with CDK Kinesis, I need a topic, and I get 1 second later a topic. I don't have, to pay upfront costs. At least not in this not similar to Kafka. Even if I use Apache Kafka on AWS, I have to wait until the environment is ready. And I cannot say to AWS, I need a topic. I have to set up Kafka. And the next step is set up topic, which I will have to care about by myself, know how to create topics in Kafka. So I would say it really depends. Also, on premise, I would absolutely use Postgres. In the cloud, I would prefer DynamoDB, Neptune, or whatever, AWS or Azure Cosmos DB. Why? Because they are fully managed by the cloud, and I don't have to care about backup and scalability or whatever. Because if I had a cloud, I would really like to focus on business logic. I have absolute no interest in infrastructure. On premise, I absolutely would run, MySQL or Vitesse or Postgres or Neo or something like this. Okay, so. If you hear me speaking, so always, so in which context he's actually talking, on premise or in cloud. Hope it makes sense. So back to chat. Okay, what is a plan when Amazon decides to bill per user too? I would say I am an architect or architect consultant. So what I can only do my clients is to advise, and they have to decide. I would say if Amazon will plan to pay per user, then everyone will move to Azure. This is what will happen. And if Azure, if Azure goes crazy, everyone will deploy to Oracle, and if not Oracle, then to Google, and all clouds are great. And I don't think they can go too crazy because there are a very young clouds, I would say, which are hugely capable, like for instance Cloudflare. They already offer competing service to AWS. I would say it is unlikely that a single cloud provider can go too crazy. And this very similar situation to application servers, right? So back then I said, okay, if they implement something, it is unlikely that the website will charge you twice as more as the others. Maybe likely, but then the projects will decide, to pick Whitefly, which happened, or Glassfish, which also happened. And Alex S., and this is Alexander Sparkovsky is his name, and he said, a great Discord, so he's also one of the Discord propagators, and he say, I'm using CloudWatch tracing with your lambdas. I'm using CloudWatch for logging and X-Ray for tracing, if this is the answer, and I also use Insights for performance analytics. Okay. Tiago says obrigado, which is thank you. I know, of course, that is thank you because I also member of the Java server, and obrigado is the first thing I looked up. And Tiago, I will send you a t-shirt. Promise is promise. I have to send a lot of t-shirts, by the way. I have a huge closet with t-shirts, which are the queue is full of t-shirts, and I will send you a t-shirt for sure. I will ping you in Discord. You give me your address and you get a t-shirt. So Ruben is still happy, but I didn't answer any question for Ruben. So Ruben, I'm glad that you are happy. Also, I didn't answer any additional question from you. So cool stuff. So let's go here. So I think we covered Tiago's question, and of course, Tiago needs a t-shirt, at least one, right? Okay, so this was with the micro jars and layers, and this one is what will be the time cost. Okay, this one with application servers. So this was video about what watch and deploy. It is a small utility I've wrote for application servers, which basically watching the changes and deploy on demand the application. And he asked me, okay, will be the application restarted completely or change code will be hot swapped only with the approach? And this is the second part of that. So what is the main difference between cloud and application servers? Or what means cloud native? I would say the core of cloud native is that the developers lost, the faith, then something can be perfect, I would say. This is, if you think, what is cloud? So cloud is an agreement that everything will fail and everything has limits. This is cloud, I would say. And the application servers with no expensive SAN hardware was the attempt to create perfect stacks which never fail. This is the main difference between both. This is why, OSGI happened when everyone wanted, to replace parts of the application server on demand, and this was the whole idea. So as you maybe know, and maybe Tiago remembers, is in his history or binging airhacks binge is I always said that I don't believe in the hot deployment because it's always an class loader magic, and from day one, if you even simple Tomcat, we had issues where you saw a log line twice because the class loader was not really unloaded because a logger was referenced statically or something like this. So I would say, so what happens in the cloud? And I think this is the right approach. In the cloud, no one would even try to replace something inside the applications. Instead, it will kill the application and start a new one. So this is the first difference to on-premise never failing application servers. So what means is in the cloud, the main challenge is, to configure the load balancer to reroute the traffic to new instances. So this is the main so you get blue-green deployments, canary deployments, stuff like that. So what you will have to do is, this is why I need health checks and all that stuff, is you ship a new version, and now someone has to decide what happens now. Do we have a rolling updates? How many instances with new version we deploy up front? And how fast the entire deployment goes. And this is why I prefer serverless. Because if I'm using AWS Lambda or even Azure Functions, very similar technology, then or not similar technology, it is, I would say, this similar outcome with different technologies, put it this way. So if I use AWS Lambda, there are no load balancers, and the cloud does it for me. If I would use ECS Fargate, I will have to care about the load balancer, and if I use the Kubernetes, I will have to decide which load balancer to pick, or if you use a cloud load balancer, then it's something is prepared for you. So I would say this what.sh was a primitive solution which works surprisingly well, or still works surprisingly well, is what.sh. So this is what we talk about, and there was a video you can watch on YouTube, and what this does is it watches your changes and deploys to all servers, which still useful, very simple. And I thought about use this for Lambda deployments and CDK already, but what usually happens, I do you have completely automated pipeline running somewhere, and if you push something to Git, it happens behind the scenes. So this is the default. Okay, now, questions here? No, everyone is happy. Back to questions. So, someone asked me on YouTube, do you still recommend this approach after almost 10 years, or now does you structure your project in a different way? What I did back then is boundary control entity, and someone asked me also, what structure do you recommend for Spring projects? I would say I never created a Spring project from scratch. I only saw Spring projects, and right now Spring is even less likely to use by me because there's the issue with startup time, which is still slower than Quarkus, for instance. And this is what. But I would say there is no reason why Spring cannot be structured the same way as a Quarkus or Helidon application. By the way, Helidon news, Helidon Nima supports now microprofile, so you can actually ship microprofile applications on Helidon, which are based on Loom, so you can have millions of threads with no impact on memory. So this is just if you have long weekends, or in Brazil gets a little bit cooler, then you can start with experimenting with this. Yes, indeed. I was actually surprised. So I told you several times about what I did. There was one sessions 10 years after from me, the same conference. I just deconstructed my 10 years old talk, and this was even, I used BCE back then, and I use still. So before the show, I coded a lot today. Everything is boundary control entity. I still like it. Of course, you have to think where put the stuff, but after years, I still understand the old code. So I think it is a good decision. And why BCE or ECB? It was more or less a political proof or political safe decision, because with that, I didn't have to justify why I'm using something, as a strange structure in projects. Okay, this is not a strange structure. It is based on standards like, robustness diagrams, UML, and whatever. It is also available in Draw.io. If you don't like UML, don't call it UML. Okay. And I think this is, let's see what happens here. Wow. So Spring IoT on GraalVM native image is very interesting. I was playing with it last week. It is interesting, but the interesting part is what I do right now. We use AWS Lambda without Graal, and I'm just waiting for Java 17 because then we can use the snap start, which will reduce the cold starts. And without Graal, all subsequent calls are even faster. So that's interesting. Okay, Joker. Local says my Spring Boot 3 apps was starting up in 120 milliseconds. I think Quarkus with GraalVM is even faster. And it has to be faster than 120 milliseconds. So I did it a lot, but again, I don't use Quarkus with GraalVM or Helidon with GraalVM because we use this standard JIT. Why this, Logan? It's very simple. If you have lots of complex business logic inside your bytecode, then the JIT optimizes better all subsequent call than Graal. So if your application runs for longer time on AWS, you will pay right now 10 to 15% less. Also, I'm a little bit impatient, if not necessary. I try to avoid GraalVM because, the entire, how to call it, cross-compilation. The compilation takes longer than Java compiler. And if you have to wait every commit 3 minutes longer or 1 minute longer, it's just too long. So I'm too impatient. So that's the reason. But Spring Boot on GraalVM, 120 milliseconds. So I would say Quarkus, what I saw, is significantly faster than this. But it really depends what you're doing. You could, sleep for 100 milliseconds during the startup and, then, okay. But Logan, you love Spring Boot. Just do it. I have no experience. What I like, Quarkus, I find Micronaut very interesting. The problem with Micronaut, it doesn't support fully the microprofile. So all my projects, nothing changed in the last 10 years, are still microprofile in Jakarta E. Okay, very good. And Logan, this would be actually cool because you are more like, more neutral than I am. Try Quarkus and try Spring Boot and compare it somewhere and create a blog post. Or if you are too afraid about the impact of such a evaluation, you can at least share it in our Discord server. It would be nice to discuss that, because then there are some Quarkus people in the Discord as well. Yeah, and Micronaut is really nice and complete different approach to Quarkus, which I really appreciate. And Logan, also take a look on Helidon. So then you have all the modern Java runtimes. And of course, I don't know whether people are there, but in our Discord server, there are Omnifish guys who got a homework assignment to make deployable on Lambda. Very good. Okay, back to questions. Mr. This is really hard to pronounce. Scream 3. Ask how to JPA multi-tenancy with Java EE and so forth. Single database server, multiple schemas for tenants, one schema per tenant, one schema for storing users, app settings, and so forth. So we have similar problem in our current projects, and what I'm a huge fan of is called the siloed approach. And the siloed approach would mean, this is the extreme, every client gets an own database. Why I like it the most, it reduces the so-called blast radius. If someone hacks or destroys the database, only one client is affected. So if this cannot be achieved, then we have already a problem, because the entire business logic becomes more complicated. What you will need to do is to invent a kind of token which uniquely identifies the user. And then you have to dispatch, the user to the right database, for instance. This would be the one possibility. Or you can use the token to decode, you can use the token as an additional unique key or unique ID in the database for distinguishing between tenants. The problem with this approach, if you can just, deploy a wrong query and you will see a wrong data from the users. And what you described here is almost standardized. This is why all the providers are supporting this. There's JPA supports this, and Hibernate and OpenJPA. And the reason being is, in Java EE 7 had to implement this out of the box. And just shortly before Java EE 7 release, they decided to drop this in JPA. So all providers can do this, but it's not part of the JPA standard. Okay, so if you ask me, and if you are in the cloud, for instance, I will deploy a small database per client, if possible. If not, then create a schema per client, if possible. If not, I would start with the most complete isolation, and if not possible, pick one underneath. So say, complete isolation, not possible. Schema, not possible. Tables, not possible. Whatever, then one table or whatever. And also cool, cloud databases, right? So the cloud databases are interesting because what you get out of the box is row level security. So you can even say only clients with this token can access this row. This is usually standard in cloud databases. In on-premise databases, not that standard. Okay, take a look at the chat. Perfect. No questions. Now here. Yes, Mr. Wanderer says, hopefully Mr. Wanderer or German Wanderer is, yeah. Are you happy with my answer, right? So this would be interesting to know. And you will have to go with the provider specific. What we did once was also interesting, was a banking project. So depending on the ID, we injected complete different entity managers. It's also easy to achieve because you can produce entity manager depending on something, and depending can be the context, the ID of the tenant, and then you injecting different entity managers pointing to different databases, and this was nearly transparent. But it turned out that we only have 5 countries or something, so we say, okay, why the circus, with dynamic dispatching and producing whatever? We just injected, the 5 entity managers right away and did a switch case, and this was easier. But you could inject on demand different entity managers instances pointing to different databases. This also worked well. So what he did is like, add inject, then qualify a multi-tenant entity manager, and then it was produced with the same qualifier. But in this producer, we injected the token. So, and now depending on the token, we decided which entity manager to return. Okay. A great one. This is from the Discord, a recent one. So a young developer joined, and it said, okay, how to learn stuff or in the career. And so what do you think with your experience is a good approach? And I mean, this experience is strange because for me, I'm still feeling like a newbie. It's actually the time flies, right? And it's not like you spend time in hundreds of projects. You see a lot, but you can be always wrong. So this is actually why I'm doing the show and do all the conference talk. And so I'm telling stories what I'm doing. And if no one says, okay, you are completely crazy, then I say, okay, it could work, right? So first, maybe I tell you how I started and how I see the world. I get lots of questions, right? Should I read this book? Or should I buy this course? Or should I do this certification? So my approach is different. So I would ask you back, why not? If you get your certification sponsored or you have money, why not to do the certification? Because, if you're watching, 10 episodes, something on Netflix, you are watching this and the time is gone as well. So the question is, why you have time to watch, 10 episodes Netflix and not have the time to learn something what you like, right? So this is just time management. Of course, if you have absolutely no time and you need to know the relaxation on Netflix, then I would tell you, okay, then don't watch Netflix, don't do, the certifications, but take a walk, right? or do some whatever, fishing or whatever you like. So this would be the answer. So, so that's the first. Or should I read the book? I have to say, I like reading. So right now a little bit less. Still like reading, but the time. So the projects are hunting me. But if I would a little bit more time, I have a pile of books. I buy constantly books, and this is and I'm on the pressure to read the books. And every time there's to read the books, and there was no bad books actually. In all books I read, I learned something. So I would say, it's not like, don't ask, what I should do. So lots of things you can do make sense, right? So if you can do certification, do the certification. If you can read a book, read a book. And it is not harmful, to learn things. Now, horizontal knowledge or sticking to one. So I think there is no sticking to one because I started with Java and my origin plan was to learn as many programming languages as possible. But I quickly realized this is actually impossible to do this. And even if I stick with Java, it's impossible to learn Java, really. So, and after all these years, I still, forget things. This is one of the reasons why I'm doing now shorts on YouTube, because it's this Java SE. If I do know Lambda, clouds, and application servers, sometimes you even, forget how the main method look like. So for me, it's great fun to remember the old Java days. This is one of the reasons why I'm recording the 60-second shorts on YouTube. So if you're interested to watch them, this is like many shorts are motivated by the comments, but this is like just to remembering stuff, and it is not harmful, right? So why I should, for me, it's not like I need a main method in all projects, but it doesn't hurt to know how main methods and the basics are working. So let's assume you are learning Java. The question is, it is not about learning the entire syntax of Java. I would start with a project, but then the question is, what is most likely to be successful if you do with Java, right? So what is the most likely applications you will build with Java? I would say right now is server-side something, right? So if you start with server-side Java project, what will happen then? You need the horizontal knowledge. So you could know, if you just stick with Java, you will quickly have to know what is a transactions, or at least how to store something with consistency. So, and this knowledge can be translated to C, C++, C#, JavaScript, whatever. So I would say even JavaScript becomes more and more like Java. The Node.js, they get very similar problems we got years ago. So they have to deal with transactions right now and all this stuff, right? So, so what it means is, if you even stick with Java, what happens then? If you know the syntax, Java doesn't matter anymore, and you can misuse Java to learn your horizontal knowledge. What I don't believe is that if you would learn, every half year a different programming language, first, it is hard to learn it good enough that you can freely implement something what you like, right? And then you will never able to broaden your horizontal knowledge because you spend all the time to learn the syntax. So I like Java. If I would start right now, I would probably pick something completely different. So Swift or Rust, for instance, right? But not Kotlin, because or Scala or Groovy, because it's for me no difference almost, I would say, to modern Java. And I still, there's if you follow the Java Jabs, it's a crazy stuff. What happens is still not enough time to learn everything about Java. So this would be my answer. So it's just, you should be, or it's a little bit strange explanation with Netflix and whatever. So what I wanted actually to tell you is, the first thing to do is you have to enjoy learning. And if you enjoy learning, then you can say, okay, what is most likely to happen? And then focus on it and see what happens, right? And don't forget things. So if you learn something, try to remember it. So this is the challenge, not to learn new things, not to forget the old things. So keep hard references to things you already learned. So I hope there was something understandable, and and don't try to trick yourself to believing, if I learn now, the hot stuff, I become, I don't know, what are you expecting, the best programmer ever, and then I can switch to something else. No, the basics and the foundation is the same to all programmers. So if you did some project with Java, you can have chat with host developers, and you will fully understand them, which problem they have with consistencies, inconsistencies. Also, they are using COBOL or RPG or old systems. Yeah. So again, pick language of your choice. I like Java, and then try, build something and broaden or increase your horizontal knowledge, and not think about the language, just build stuff. So this would be my thing. And read as much as possible. If you have the possibility to do the certification, just do them, because there are lots of companies who just would like to see, these certificates, and they don't care a lot. The HR departments, what but the more things you can print out and bring with them, or send them PDF, all the certifications you did, the more likely it is that you get a job. So this would be the guerrilla tactics. So let's see what the chat says. And do you like Rust? Tiago asked me. I think the Rust is really interesting. Liking, I don't think it makes sense for business development, but how I would say at least Rust has a lots of interesting, complete different stuff to Java, right? So this is what I really like. And I mean, Kotlin or JavaScript or TypeScript is, for me, TypeScript is completely boring. So if I see TypeScript, says the question is no, why not Java, right? Okay. Okay, perfect. So Ruben is always happy. That's cool. Ruben didn't ask any questions, but he likes that. Okay. Okay, what he says in this one, you are doing much better than the hacking nights back in the days. Hacking nights? What I did back in the days, I forgot about that. Maybe the new format that I'm more informal, maybe. Okay, very, very good. Thank you, and Grüße to Zurich. Yeah. By the way, Ruben, I only have, if you are in Zurich, I'm in Zurich end of March. There will be Java user group in Zurich. I'm just thinking about a catchy title for that. But this will be very, what I told you, with the cloud versus premise, something around that. Oh, Logan asked me a very good question. So first, I'm really looking forward to upcoming Java releases, and what I like the most. So pattern matching is there, but pattern matching for switches with the Java records. This is what what I'm really looking forward to. And what is pattern matching to all the others? Listeners who don't know, or watchers who don't know what it is the switches. So what we have right now is pattern matching for instance of. I recorded a short 60 seconds with an example if you're interested. So go there and watch it. But what it basically is, you can say if customer instance of or C instance of customer, or no, if object instance of customer C. So it means you go to the if statements, and if you are type of the customer, then the variable C already is casted for you, so you can save one liner, which is already nice. And something similar happens in switch statement, where you can dispatch on the type, and let's say in case it is a client, a customer or client, then it is already casted to the customer, to the record. So this is, but what I'm really looking forward is so-called destructuring, but they call it deconstruction. And what it means is that this is the opposite of construction. So if you have let's say on the right side, a Java record, and you are only interested in two attributes from the Java record, you can say, okay, I would like to have the two attributes and map them to my variables. It is like automatic extraction, a subset of a project without calling the getters. Or there are no getters in records, but without records it will be getters. I use it in JavaScript a lot, and it saves me lots of hassle. And I'm really appreciating to see this. Of course, indirectly, I'm really excited about Project Loom, because I don't have to argue why I'm not using reactive programming anymore. It just is no more needed for most cases. And what else? The memory access in Panama could be interesting, because sometimes we have to call native code, and it works. I think it was Panama. I confused the names, but there's like a new JNI spec Java native interface, which is really cool. Yeah, and Logan is the new hotshot from CJAG. So I attended the Java user group meeting in Chicago, and Logan was able to answer all the questions from the attendees in real time. And I say, hey Logan, who are you actually? And this is a young developer, so he invited him to my podcast, and in a few weeks you will find a discussion, Logan and me, on airhacks FM. So take a listen on this. And Logan Company is hiring. I don't know whether they found a developer. Logan, if you like, just put to the chat, the name of your company, and they can work. And as I remember, they are working on AWS serverless. Exactly. Okay, now the expert, PCF, Carl Nordin, said, pattern matching sounds cool for seed classes, exception handling by type. Monad functional programming, what gives me new motivation to learn? Yeah, I don't see the relation to Monad, because I forgot what monads were. I think this was one. Forgot. I tried now to remember this several times. But yeah, I would say the cool story is if new features are delivered with Java, we can just use them because there's no additional cost to use them. I don't have to think, about libraries, versioning libraries, and stuff like that. So thank you. If you like, see you in airhacks Discord. Yeah, just nice community. So just feel free to join. I don't even think you have to use the invitation link. You can just search for airhacks in the Discord, and should be also doable. Okay, nice. I think we covered everything. Wait a sec. There are hopefully no questions left. My internet is almost down. Streaming is still working. So all questions answers, unbelievable. Yeah. Horizontal knowledge or deep dive, I would say both. Start with deep and then broaden. Otherwise, you won't manage to deploy anything because, yeah. I would say see you next month and almost in spring. And yeah, see you later. Bye.